Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world today. Thank you for joining another session of Pandemic Punditry's Marketing in a Pandemic. We are thrilled, honored to have the wunderkind, Mark Metry, here today with us on Screw Being Shy, the title of his best-selling novel, or a book. And he's also the host of one of the global top 100 podcast on LinkedIn, Humans 2.0. He also has been featured on Amazon Prime's The Social Movement docu-series. And he's obviously a well-known keynote speaker on Forbes and other forums. So we're thrilled to have Mark join us today. And he has an amazing, inspiring story and a lot of great insights into the human condition as well as entrepreneurship, which we're going to sort of plumb as much as we can in the next hour. So Mark, welcome to Pandemic Punditry.
Thank you so much for having me, brother. And yeah, ready to be of value and hopefully give some value to your audience.
Great. So looking forward to sort of kicking this off by maybe Mark, I know that, you know, there's a lot written about you. There's, you know, a ton of content on the web about you. But for the benefit of some of the viewers who may have not indulged and got a little bit of your background, I know that you've sort of faced significant life challenges on the personal front to sort of reinvent yourself or transform yourself to this human 2.0 that you write so eloquently about and talk so eloquently about.
Yeah.
And so instead of me sort of saying a little bit of that story, if you can give our viewers a hint of sort of the obstacles that you've overcome to be where you are sitting today, I think that will be appreciated.
Yeah, of course. And the best way that I've found to explain this, honestly, is I spent the first part of my life truly not wanting what I'm doing today. And what I mean from that is when I was growing up, I didn't want anybody to know who I was. I didn't want anybody to know my story. I didn't want anybody to know my name. And, you know, of course I had problems. Everyone has problems. You know, for me, I'm a son of immigrants. My parents came to America from Egypt. We grew up in poverty, government housing, food stamps. And also at this time, you know, I had mostly lived in the inner city in my area. But as my parents got better jobs, we moved into a super small town in Massachusetts. And this super small town was really interesting because it was a small town that had no racial diversity whatsoever. Okay. And also at this time in America, this was like post 9/11. And so if you were Middle Eastern, if you were Arab, everyone just called you a terrorist or like a Islamic fundamentalist or something like that. And so I remember just at a young age, just facing a tremendous amount of racism, really just having no friends. That really caused me to have social anxiety, which is, you know, I would always be the quiet kid everywhere I went. I could never be my full self. I could never truly do things. But honestly, looking back at this, the best part about this was that because I was poor and because I had no friends, that forced me to do something. And so I remember going on the internet at a young age and really like by the time I was 12, 13, I began to experiment with different things online. And I really just became like an entrepreneur. I had like my first successful business when I was 15 that started making me six figures. And I just truly was able to like completely change my life and my family's life and our lifestyle just through that money. And so that totally changed my life, like literally speaking. But honestly, the worst part about it though was I had always believed in this narrative of like the American dream of, you know, once you make enough money, you can buy a house, you can get married, you can get a dog, and then all your problems will go away and you'll be happy. And that's just like what I always thought. And I always thought to myself, like, you know, I'm super depressed, I'm anxious, but once I make a ton of money and I'm rich and successful, then I'll be happy. And, you know, I fell right into that trap and I was super confused. And I obviously, you know, understood that's not true. And so really I was just like hopeless for a period of time because I just saw myself as a person that had all these issues. I didn't have any friends. I couldn't talk about them with the world. And so basically how this played out was by the time I was about 18 years old, I had went off to college. And this is really where I begin to gain a new level of awareness, and I begin to like understand everything that I've been mentioning to you, because a big part of this is I didn't know that this was happening while it was happening in the moment. There's that quote that says you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. And so when I went to college, that's really where I began to shift things. And at first I fell down even a darker path because I had tried to change myself, but it didn't work. And I failed. And, for me, when I was 18, I was like obese. My lifelong social anxiety turned into social isolation. I'm pretty sure I got seriously depressed for the first time in my life. Just started doing things that just aren't true to me. And I really just kind of had like my rock bottom in like 2015 when I was about 18 years old. And ever since that moment, I've been taking steps after weeks and months and years. And, that's brought me to this journey that I'm on now in terms of, the business that I run, the podcast that I do, the Amazon Prime documentary series, the nonprofit education that I sit on the board of. I do a lot of different things, but ultimately it's all about mental health, because I think that as an entrepreneur, I just got caught up in that one definition of success. And then I'm also really passionate about helping people who have social anxiety, or they feel like they're shy, or they're too introverted and they can't speak up, help them deal with these things as this problem that I've overcome today. And so, that's my life story. I'm just a normal person. I've gone through these challenges and I'm just trying to make the best out of it. And I'm super grateful. And now I'm just trying to help other people and trying to help them become successful.
I mean, it's just amazing that, you've accomplished what you've accomplished. And obviously, your success, what we're hoping to gain today is, and for the benefit of our viewers and audiences, to maybe, to understand, and maybe, with the pandemic that's going on, I mean, everybody is sort of, for the first time, I think, sort of, if you were not aware of your own mortality, you're certainly aware of your own mortality. You're paying a lot more attention to your health, right? And being cooped up in some places and being isolated like you have been socially. I mean, people, the anxiety levels are probably at record highs globally. And so we have, maybe because of external circumstances and other things, a lot of people sort of going through what you sort of went through and successfully sort of overcome and channeled, I would think, to pursuits that are bigger than yourselves now, right? And I think, so we're hoping that maybe in the course of this conversation with you, that you will be able to sort of, glean a few things to help our audience just sort of come through this pandemic, more whole or better or than they were when they went into it. So I think that's the objective of today's conversation. If you're wondering, but that's, and I'm sure Karthika has some great questions for you as well on that subject. But,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, well, I say it's definitely been hard on some people more than others, but, it's interesting, right? Like, over this weekend, I had like my first like social, gathering for like the first time in a while. And honestly, I'm not going to lie. There were definitely moments where I felt like some parts of my social anxiety began to come back. And that's because I haven't hung out with a decent amount of people in a while. And so, one thing that I would say is that, you definitely have to have compassion for yourself. You have to understand that this is a really weird time in human history, especially if you're struggling a lot. It's okay, as long as you're not like being violent or like, be doing anything crazy or to harm yourself. I think this is a time to really have compassion on yourself, especially, parents that have kids that don't even know how they're going to manage the whole back to school thing. But, honestly, here's what I would say. I think the number one thing that I have learned from like a health perspective that I have already known is that, even like the World Health Organization was talking about this, but your immune system is so controlled by your diet. And, I began to learn about this even before this pandemic, because growing up as a kid, I had things like asthma. I had various chronic illnesses that are all autoimmune based, which is when your immune system has some sort of malfunction and attacks itself. This is actually very, very common in America and a lot of Western countries that kids have these. But for me, when I started to shift my diet, all of a sudden my asthma, my allergies, all that stuff went away. And I began to look into it and I discovered this. And so whether it's Corona, whether it's just like your health in general, I think that looking at your food is so important. And in terms of food, like this is, everyone knows that you should eat healthy, but then people ask you, what is healthy? What really is healthy? Should I be on the keto diet? Should I be on the vegan diet? Should I do intermittent fasting? Should I eat 6 times a day? There's so many different paths. Honestly, what I have learned and interviewing some of the top like doctors and neuroscientists and nutritionists on my show, I have learned that there's no such thing as a universal healthy diet. Although there are definitely some universal facts, like you should not really be consuming anything that's artificial. Any kind of like junk food, snack, soda, all that stuff, objectively speaking, is bad for everybody. Some people may be more sensitive to it than others, but that stuff is a big no-no. And for me, like I figured this out by, if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm looking at a box and I flip over the ingredients list, if there's anything in there that I don't recognize, then I know that my body is not going to recognize it. And so a lot of people think when they go to the grocery store and there's like 700 things on the ingredient list, and it's like red 6 monosodium maltodextrin. No, you don't understand those things, not because you're uneducated or not because you have to be a doctor to read your food. That is just heavily processed crap that when you put that in your body, that's going to potentially mess up your biochemistry. That could potentially mess up your mental health. We now know that diet controls so much. And for example, like in my book, Screw Being Shy, I talk a lot about mental health. I talk a lot about anxiety, focus, your mental muscle, so to speak. And one of the biggest things that really blew my mind when I was doing the research for my book was realizing that, I think life is very much, it's gray. There's black, white, there's gray. There's some things that are yes, no, and there are some things where it's paradoxical. There's many different perspectives. But one of the things that I learned about the brain, about mental health, that I would say is a little bit more black and white, that is very basic for people to understand, is so much of our life is determined by these things called neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are these neurons, are these multifunctionary cells and circuits in our brain and in our body that help us essentially live. We have the dopamine neurotransmitter that helps us do things, that helps us form habits, that helps us automate things in our brain. We have the oxytocin neurotransmitter that helps us feel love, that helps us feel connection with our fellow human. And so these are all very important. And one of the most important neurotransmitters that I found in general, but especially for anyone who has like social anxiety or anxiety in general, is this neurotransmitter called serotonin. And serotonin does a lot of different things in our body. It helps to regulate our mood. It helps regulate our appetite. It helps regulate our sleep. It helps regulate how we function in social groups. And so what I tell people is this, you could read different books. You can listen to podcasts. You can do meditation. And I think all those things are amazing. I meditate every day. But the reality is that we eat food not to make hunger go away. We eat food because our body's trying to replenish our cells, to then rebuild our organs, to then rebuild our neurotransmitters. And when you look at serotonin, the craziest thing about this is that for the last 10, 15 years in the scientific medical community, they thought that most of serotonin, because it's a neurotransmitter, is in our brain. And that sounds like common sense, but it actually turns out that 90 to 95% of our serotonin isn't even in our brain, and it's in our gut. And our gut is basically this ecosystem of bacteria that whenever we eat food, it automatically goes to them and they eat it, and then they produce more bacteria that can then affect our hormones, how our body functions. And so really, if you look at it, like the key to mental health is to make sure your neurotransmitters are right. The key to making sure your neurotransmitters are right is to get your gut microbiome well. And there's many different, it's very complex. There's many different ways,
Sure.
but eating food, natural food, not drinking too much alcohol, soda, drugs, making sure that you're calm, you're not stressed out. You're not like eating in like 5 seconds. You're not like always on the go. All these things, if you begin to look at them, they can help, reset like the baseline of your brain's neurotransmitters. And the truth is that when you're able to do this, you are much, much, much better able to handle stress and anxiety when they do come to you. And this is something that I've faced. And, people ask me, like, hey, Mark, ever since like your rock bottom in 2015, have you ever had like a really bad moment? And of course I still have problems. I know at the beginning of this pandemic, it was a little bit difficult, but overall, no. Overall, I'm like still very healthy. If anything, I'm getting more healthier. And I think a big part of that has to do with like, a big part of what I do in terms of my self-care is I focus on these neurotransmitters, because I know that my mindset is housed and stored in my brain. And if my brain is unhealthy because of nature, because of reasons, then that's going to trouble my mindset. And so you kind of take a step back and you look at, mental health and mindset, and then how that relates with your focus at work, your productivity. All these things are connected. And so I think one of the biggest things that people should be doing is, learning more about their gut microbiome, but just eating healthier. I think out of all the things, that and probably meditation, those two are probably the biggest things that have given me the highest ROI on my action, on my time invested into it.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm glad you talk about that. We have a separate mini series on putting the planet on a pandemic diet, and we talk a lot about healthy eating. So this dovetails very nicely into that as well. I'm just wondering, I'm just curious, Mark. I mean, if you were a kid of the pre-internet era, right, and you had these social anxiety challenges, shall we say? Yes, I mean, the steps you took towards, fixing your microbiome and the brain, and therefore the mindset, that obviously still applies. But what role do you think the internet had on sort of, tackling these anxiety issues? Because some of the things that, I've noticed is that, a lot of the things that people do on the internet, I mean, you can be as judgy or as harsh or as aggressive as you want to be, even if you were socially awkward in person, because it gets you, there's an anonymity associated with that. So you can obviously be whoever you want to be, create whatever persona or avatar you want to be, and act that out without any sort of issue. If you were sort of didn't have the internet to sort of reinvent yourself, would you still have been who you are, or did the internet play or not play a significant part in this evolution or transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. I sometimes think that, if I grew up before the internet, I sometimes think like maybe when I was 12, maybe when I was 13, maybe when I was 14, maybe I would have been a little bit more incentivized to try to make friends, because I didn't have the internet, and the internet is where I did make some friends early on. But I don't know, I'm pretty sure I still would have been broke, not had money, which then would have led me to not realize the true definition of success, which honestly would have probably made me like some 25, some 30-year-old that is working at some corporation that just kind of like does his job, doesn't speak up, is probably would be obese, probably would still be depressed, probably would have some addiction issues. So I don't know, I think there's pros and cons to it. I think one of the biggest things though is that, like one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Screw Being Shy, is because I think there's like one subsection in the last chapter of the book that's like about like the internet and social media. But for the other book, it has nothing to do with the internet or social media. And like, one thing I tell people is that like, when it comes to like online and like making content, or whether like you run your own business and you're super shy and you're an introvert, the truth is that's just going to be with you if you haven't dealt with that and you try to make content. A lot of people think that, hey, if I'm shy, I can like make these social media videos. And I don't know, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But what I always tell people is like, you have to deal with yourself, like you have to deal with who you are offline before you can then go online. And like, for example, a lot of people ask me like, hey, Mark, how are you so authentic in your content? Like, how are you vulnerable? Like, how do you be honest? And I tell them that like, when I was growing up with social anxiety, I was living with that, as in like my brain was constantly trying to get me to not be like myself, because if I did act like myself, then people would make fun of me. And so when it comes to the internet, that's like the only choice that I now have in my mind of like, I have to be myself, because if I'm not myself, then this is like a whole like other like social anxiety thing. So yeah, I mean, the answer is that I don't 100% know what it would be like, but I definitely think it has helped me, and for sure maybe hasn't helped me. And I'd say the last thing too is like, I remember when I was growing up, I remember the people around me, all they were interested in was stuff that I wasn't interested in. They were interested in playing sports. They were interested in like politics. They were interested in these things. And I was never interested in these things at all. And so I think a big part of why I thought I was an introvert in the first place was because I was like, I don't want to talk about these things that everybody else is talking about. But once you get on the internet, you then discover other communities of people who do like what you like and do want to talk about what you talk about. And so I think in some ways it's definitely tremendously helped me out from that perspective, because, truth is, man, is like when I was starting this journey in 2015, I had nobody around me in my physical life that was on the same track as me in my mind. And so I heavily use the internet to make new friends, to surround myself with people who are similar to me. And then the other thing that I would say too is I definitely think that social media and having a brand can help a little bit with having social anxiety, because like, for example, now this is pre-COVID, if I got invited to any events, like as a speaker, and I go to the event and maybe some people recognize me at the event, they follow me on Instagram. They follow me on LinkedIn. They know what I like. They know what I like talking about. So they immediately walk up to me and they're like, hey, Mark, what do you think about this? Which they know is something that I just talked about. And so I think in some ways it has cut the small talk in a lot of scenarios, and it's just jumped kind of straight into the meat. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have the internet, but overall, when I look at it today, I think there are definitely some pros and cons.
Yeah, clearly. Karthika?
Yeah. So, Mark, it's interesting because I think when I was watching one of your trailers, a few things really popped out for me. Where you'd said chaos and order both are needed in life, right? And right now with the pandemic situation, globally, people are all going through a lot of chaos, right? So how do entrepreneurs or people who work, or, moms, how do they find order in this sort of an environment, like mentally?
Yeah. This is honestly one of the biggest things. And the truth is that this is hard because it's every day, right? Like you can have like a great day that's ordered today, but then tomorrow, something happens with your kids, you get busy, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what am I doing? Honestly, the biggest thing that I have learned is that when you are in times of uncertainty and chaos, the greatest thing is to create your own order. And like, for example, one of the ways that I do that is what I have learned is like, personally for me, if I haven't set aside time to like relax, as in like go for a walk, talk to a friend of mine, meditate, do some stretching, journaling, I have tried my best to never be by myself and just doing nothing, because I have learned that if I'm just like randomly sitting around here not doing anything, then my mind is going to start thinking like, oh, you know, the economy is crashing, or your business is going to fall over, like all these different things that my brain wants me to believe. And so for me, the biggest thing that I've learned is like every morning for me, I'll like sit with a cup of like my green tea. I'll do my 15-20 minute meditation session, and then I'll use my journal or I'll use my iPad and I'll write down just like what are my priorities for the day. And I'll just like let my mind just be free and write these things out. And then what I'll do is like once I've written a list of these things that I have got to do, then I go into my phone and then I take those and I put them in my calendar. And I say like, okay, at 10 a.m., I'm going to be doing this until 10:30. And then at 11:30, I'm going to do this until 1:30. And so that's one of the biggest things that I've been able to do that have truly enabled me to keep my mind ordered, especially in these times. And, you know, the other thing that I would also say is that this is so important, because if you're not able to be ordered, then you're just going to go along with whatever the world just sort of tells you. And that can be super dangerous, especially if you are an entrepreneur, especially if you're somebody out here that is trying to create things. Because the truth is that, in my opinion, you know, as much as the world is in chaos right now, I still believe that there is an insane opportunity. And I think that just the lens of opportunity has shifted a little bit in terms of the grand scheme of the world. And I'm obviously not going to say that every industry is like doing awesome right now, because there are definitely some that are suffering more than others. However, I think the grand scheme of opportunity of how someone can approach this, it definitely exists. It is definitely out there. But I think if you don't have anything on your calendar, or you even have just like some basic to-do list, that is a recipe to just get caught up in how the world wants you to think. And you know, you're going to be in a defensive position. And I think as an entrepreneur, especially now, you have to go on the offense. I think generally speaking, I think there are definitely times where you may need to defend. You may definitely need to, you know, save money to not furlough workers and different things like that. But like, for example, like the last 3 weeks ago, I started like a new business, and it was so terrifying. Yeah, it was so terrifying. But ultimately, you know, there's been definitely ups and downs, but it's been super great, because you truly do begin to understand that if you're able to pivot, if you're able to shift and see how the market is reacting right now, and see like, how can I genuinely be of service to people, and you create something, it's going to be very hard. It's going to be very challenging, especially at the beginning, but you take a shot. And for all you know, like 5 years from now, you could look back at that and be like, man, I'm so glad that I started my business in 2020 in the middle of this recession. And like, I was on LinkedIn the other day and I saw this post, and it was like a list of businesses that started in 2008 recession. And it was like WhatsApp, Uber, it was like some crazy billion-dollar companies. And so the truth is that the opportunity is out there, but you're not going to get the opportunity if you're living in chaos. And so like personally for me, I had this problem yesterday where I felt like I wasn't really ordered. I was living too much in chaos. And then I was thinking about it, of like why this is. And it's because I didn't really do that good of a job in like my journaling and writing these things down and making my schedule. I kind of just did a half job. I kind of did it right, didn't kind of do it right. Didn't really schedule all the things that I wanted to in my calendar. And then, for example, if someone has like never done this before, if this idea seems strange of like scheduling things in your calendar, because I know a lot of people don't do this. For me, the question that I ask myself is like, tomorrow, how can I literally have the most perfect day? tomorrow, how can I have the most perfect day? And I'll just sit down with myself and I'll say, okay, my perfect day to me is I wake up at like 6:30 and I meditate, I journal, and then I go to the park with my friend and we go for a walk, we go for a run. And then after, I have this awesome breakfast that's like an omelet with these things that I really like eating. And then after, I have this meeting and then that I'm going to take outside, by this park. So it's like really just like finding ways to like negotiate with yourself and being like, how can I literally create a day that I'm so excited to live? Because if you approach it from that perspective, then that will help you order it out. And yeah, when you're able to do that, it really does work. Like it's so crazy. Like, because I don't know, this might sound woo woo, but like there will be times where I feel like my business isn't moving. I feel like there aren't that many opportunities because there's so much chaos. And then I'll just like look at my journal and I'm like, I haven't even journaled about this over the last few days. And then I'll journal and then I'll be like, I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that I have already gotten. And I'll try to visualize things and I'll just keep journaling about opportunities. And then literally like 20 minutes later, I get an email that totally changes like my business's outlook and trajectory. And so this happens all the time. It's just like a pattern that I think that we get caught up in ourselves of like, oh, the world sucks. There's no opportunity. It's filled with chaos. There's people being shot in the street. Like there's some crazy stuff happening. Why should I do this? Why should I try to do this? Because there's no opportunity. When in reality there is. And like, there's so much money out there, even still like in this recession. So it's out there. You just got to go get it.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, Mark, because one of the other key things that you said that really stood out for me was, to have self-worth innately and to live a life of service, right? Which I think was like awesome because I truly believe that people should live a life of service. So from that end, what are your thoughts about this whole concept of servant leadership that a lot of people now are talking about? And how do you think that can help employees get through the pandemic?
Yeah. So, for me, I have 4 full-time employees and, I'm super grateful that it's awesome because I had on my podcast, this guy named Art Barter, who is the CEO of the Servant Leadership Institute. And, honestly, the best part is that, for me, like I grew up in a religious community. I grew up in a church. And one of the things that they had us do was serve younger people. And so I'm so grateful that literally throughout my entire life, I've been doing this. So it's just common sense to me. But in terms of like the employees that I have, one of the biggest things that I have stressed so much is that I am, and this is hard to do, right? This is easier said than done, but I am like a lifetime friend and mentor and supporter to my employees. And like what I mean by that is like I have had an employee this year leave our business to literally start his own company that I helped him start. And so the biggest thing that I can get across personally, like to my employees, is that I want to support them throughout their life, whether they're in this job, whether they're not, whether they want to start a side hustle, whether they don't, whether they want more time off to take care of their sick mother. I mean, there's really just so many different perspectives. But I think looking at it from the perspective of like, how do you genuinely, like, how do you become a supporting friend to your employees for life and support them regardless of whether they're going to work for you or not? And I think the other big thing is that, like we just need to change how we do business. Like, for example, like, we used to have, like for me and my business, we used to have like meetings every day, and we don't do that anymore. We have meetings a couple times a week, and then meetings between other group members. But we had to shift that because the truth is like our time throughout the day has changed so much, especially people who have kids. Like I have 2 employees who have kids. And I think really just like telling to your employees to like really just like be honest with them and be like, hey, I know the reality is that the most important thing to you is not this job. Where like the most important thing to you is probably like your health and your family, and maybe like your like your spirituality. I don't know. And so I think that is probably the most important thing of like of saying that, because like what I tell my employees, like I've had employees show up like to a call, not a lot of times, but a handful of times where I can tell like they're out of it, where I can tell like maybe they didn't go to sleep last night. And I literally, you know, brought them over to the side and I talked to them. And then you find out that, oh yeah, they had to stay up late because, you know, I don't know, like their boyfriend was calling them and he got into a car accident, and then she had to stay up late at night, and then she wasn't able to like go to the gym and meditate and like do all the things that she does to help her. And then she's on this call now. And so I think it's a certain kind of leadership to say like, hey, don't worry about this right now. Go take an hour, go take 2 hours, no stress, do what you got to do, and then come back when you feel like yourself. You know, I think like having that empathy of just like realistically on like how this world works in like a 24-hour basis is so important. So yeah, personally for me, those have been two things that that have been great. And then, you know, honestly, the last thing that I would say is that I'm sorry, I talk a lot. I host a podcast. The last thing that I would say is that you know, like, especially with this pandemic, like I caught myself so many times just like super stressed out. Like, oh, we got to do this thing. There's this deadline. We got to do that. We got to do that. We got to do that. We got this email. We got, you know, all the normal things of running a business times 10 because of this pandemic. And there were honestly like times where I just like wanted to, you know, talk to my employees and be like, yo, I don't know what to do. I need help. I'm lost. I'm super confused. And I think at first I didn't want to do that, but I think what happened was, like if you are in a position of being a leader and you're honest about how you feel, and you're honest about, you're like, hey guys, I don't exactly know how we're going to do this, but, you know, I can promise you that I'm going to try my best. We're going to figure this out the same way that we've always figured it out. A lot of the times then you get your employees, they have that same exact pressure in their head. But then when the leader says it, then they're like, oh man, whew. Yeah. And so those three things I think are the biggest things of like making sure that the people who work with you or for you, they know that you got them in a realistic way for life, that you're your mentor for life. You'll help them whether they work with you or not. Being able to just be understanding and realistic of how everyone's 24 hours works, especially now. And then 3, in terms of being open and honest if you are in that leadership position, because then your employees are going to also be honest with you. And that is going to help create a culture of, you know, not too much toxicity, not too much pressure, and it's not too much people feeling like they just got to do everything themselves, but just be more open about it and be more human. Personally, for me as a leader, that's how I have approached this time. But yeah, it's extremely hard, super hard.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I can say amen to that one. I think you know, you've sort of described some of the leadership styles that I've tried to adopt and employ as well over the years. And, you know, it works 95% of the time. And I always say the 5% it doesn't work, you know, that's a margin of error I'm happy to live with, you know.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
I mean, 95% of something is better than and 0. So, I mean, I'm happy with that. I think, you know, interestingly, Mark, you know, you talked about, you know, Growcast and starting that business. Obviously, you're an expert on LinkedIn. You've sort of, you know, created a you know, top 100 podcast. You know, I've watched some of the content that you share. You built an amazing network of people. I mean, that, you know, and these are all great relationships that you've spoken about. And I think, you know, I have a sales background. Karthika has a marketing background. And I know that the latest mantra that everybody talks about is, oh, you know, get your social media presence, build your own personal brand, you know, do all this LinkedIn stuff. I think they do, you know, they should definitely subscribe to Growcast and take some pointers from you. I highly encourage that. But that aside, I think a lot of people treat some of those relationships in a transactional manner, right? And they're not authentic about them. So they, even when they network, I guess pre-COVID in person, they go to all these places to network and meet people, but in the back of the mind is like, hey, how can I make money, or how can I get some,
Oh my
how
God.
can I benefit, right? And that never works, right? So, my career, I mean, if you don't genuinely like people and you don't like to know people and find out and expand your horizons, then you cannot hope to have any transactional ever happen with them, right? So I think this is one of the key points that you always bring out, is that don't think of this as another way to transact. It is not a transactional platform, right? It's something much more valuable than that. Maybe you care to put your point of view there? Interesting to hear.
Absolutely. I love what you said, and this is why, like, I traditionally speaking, I'm not a fan of networking events, because I see this all the time, right? And I used to see this so often. In fact, I actually changed my approach, and this is what I would do. So I mean, I'm a speaker, and a lot of the times I would mainly just go to events unless like a close friend of mine invited me. I just went to events that I was invited to as a speaker. And so the craziest thing is I would see these people who you said of like, they're trying to network, but they're just like in the back of their mind, it's like, hey, can I make money off this person? They just treat everyone as a walking wallet. Mm-hmm. And the truth is like, I saw that and I would see this immediately. I would say someone, and then the second they're like, oh, this is not a potential client of mine, let me just walk away. And I see this happen like so often. It like truly grossed me out. It's, in my opinion, it's truly like disgusting. Like, as someone who is like a very like sensitive, emotional human person, this stuff to me is so icky. And what I began to do was like, the events where I was invited to as a speaker, when someone asked me what I did, I would literally tell them like, oh, I actually do maintenance and cleaning and janitorial services for this building, but they just invited me to this event after. And then I would literally immediately see them walk away, but then the look on their face when I would walk up on stage and grab the microphone, that's what I started doing. Yeah, that's what I started doing, because I totally agree with your point. And the reality is, man, is that it's just some people, they don't have a strategy or a system that can help them realistically and like humanize this. I think some people, they have they do the wrong kind of automation. They have the wrong bots where like, I get DMs, I get emails all the time where, it's so like, and there's nothing wrong with it, but people will ask you for something, and the second you say no, or the second that you reject them, they immediately never talk to you again. And like, I see this all the time with people, for example, who invite me or who try to get on my podcast. Like they will never comment on anything regarding my content. They'll never do that. But they'll just send me 15 messages that say, how can I be on your podcast? How can I be on your podcast? How can I be on your podcast? And the truth is that relationships are long. That's what I've learned. Like I have relationships today that have just like organically been extremely valuable from multiple different perspectives, because I just was friends with this person for the last 4 years. And I just, when they wanted me, I just talked to them. I just helped them out with whatever way I could. And so that's one of the biggest things that I've learned of like, I think so many of us are trying to, build out like these marketing, these social media strategies that remove the humanity from us to just get, on podcasts, to just do that. When in reality, like, you have no idea if you actually show yourself authentically to that person and you meet them, maybe in 3 years, they invite you to be on their podcast, and maybe their podcast is even bigger at that time than it was if you were on it 3 years ago. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I see this all the time. But to be honest with you, it's also very hard too, right? Because I find that, like for me, like it's very hard for me to just like randomly jump on calls that people invite, that people ask me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to do the most of them. But it's just very difficult because, if someone just reaches out to you, they're not really specific in how they reach out to you. or like they ask you something broad, like to pick your brain, it's just very hard to like meet those if I'm getting like 60 of those a day. And so there are definitely like very real limitations that I do think makes this hard. But yeah, you know, I'm still trying to find solutions for this. I talk to like my friends who have like millions of followers on Instagram, and like they're trying to figure this out because it's so tough for them, especially the more people that you have to reach out to you. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think I have a good solution, but I think trying to find ways to like scale our humanity with technology, with like everything we do, rather than just, you know, trying to do it like the cheapest way that is not like, that's just completely automated, that is not human. I think it's going to hurt a lot of those potential relationships that you could have. And so, yeah, it's tough, but yeah, it is what it is. And the truth is that, like for me, like I always try to like hop on calls with people who are like 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, people who are young like me, because one, I know there's no way I'm probably going to make money from them. Probably not. But I know that if they take what I say and they're successful, and 5 years from now, they're going to know exactly what I've said to them. And that's happened so many different times. Like there are so many people out there, whether they were my clients or just people who I just talked to, who took what I said, took my advice, and they roll with it. Some of those people are like more successful than me, depending on the scenario. So, I think I believe in that a lot. And yeah, and I mean, I've just like had so many scenarios in the past where I met someone and like, there was no way that they could possibly help me, but I just tried to help them. And then like some random thing happens that I could never explain, where it's like, they just brought me in an insane opportunity. So yeah, I think life is long. And I think looking at relationships from that long-term perspective, rather than like, how can I close this in like 2 days if they're a potential client, that's so important. So yeah, man, I love the fact that you said that. And yeah, I love doing that at networking events. It's so funny.
I know. Yeah, I got to borrow that next time around, and I'll give you credit on that if it works that way. But you know, it's you know, when Karthik and I started this in April, I mean, we kept this thing. I mean, people ask us all the time now, you know, hey, you know, how are you monetizing this? How, you know, are you making money? And you know, so we tell them, and they're always usually shocked. We say, actually, no, it's all money going out. It's coming from our individual bank accounts, and we are spending way more than we are bringing in. In fact, we are bringing in almost nothing. But the joy that we get from, you know, speaking to people like you and others, and the amount of knowledge we've acquired collectively on subjects that, you know, we wouldn't have spent time or an effort to understand, you know, has certainly, you know, in terms of perspective and our you know, view of the world, it's transformed. And, you know, every interaction like this one we're having with you, Mark, I mean, it just changes you inside. Your DNA is changed in interactions like this, and we enjoy it. And so we told ourselves that as long as we're having fun and this is happening and we're help others, which is the service component of this, right? So I'm hoping that people listening today and people who listen to our recordings will come away with saying, hey, if Mark Metry can do that, I can do that, right? And I can adopt 1% of what he's done. And if it changes my life 20%, then that's made an impact, right? And we get emails and messages all the time from people saying, hey, look, I listened to your thing and it changed my perspective. That is better than any sort of monetization people talk about. And you know what? Money will eventually come if it's meant to come. And if that's your singular purpose, there's a lot easier ways of making money than what Karthik and I do, you know, in terms of preparation and the effort we put in. I mean, you know, hey, that's not the main goal. And I think we have expanded our LinkedIn networks dramatically, and we've met some wonderful and fascinating people. And I think that's reward enough, frankly, you know.
That's so awesome. And I'm so proud of the work that you guys do. And yeah, you know, like if I did it, literally anybody can do it. And like, I want to stress this point because, you know, I'm someone who I come from a poor family. I don't have any connections. I don't think I'm like talented. I don't think I'm like necessarily extremely intelligent. I don't think I'm, you know, I have any of these special things. I don't focus that well. But now when I look at it, I have truly built a network of people that are some of the most powerful people in the world. And I never thought that I'd do it, but what happens is you just show up every day and you just show your best self. And eventually what happens is the people who are open to that, they also see your best self. And they're like, I see this kid, or I see this person, and I want to help this person. And today I look at my podcast, I'm sitting on like almost 600 episodes now, literally met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leaders. Those have flourished into insane opportunities, insane connections that have really just made my life. And I'm super grateful to be in the position that I'm in, because it's enabled me to, start various businesses, start various services that can then, take someone who is maybe on like stage 1 or stage 2 of my journey, and then help them get to where they are faster. And like, I know you just said it as like an example. And obviously, yeah, if you're trying to start a podcast to just make money, no, there's way easier ways to make money. But like, for example, like I teach this in my program of how podcasters can monetize their show and make money. And I look at my show, for example, where obviously there's a lot of work involved, but you can work with like a handful of companies that are conscious companies that have their best client and interests in mind. And, you can get them to help monetize your show, and you can have like a major source of income. Like my show is like my LinkedIn live streams, they're sponsored by a company, and
Restream, right?
Yeah, Restream, amazing company. They're in Austin. Definitely, a great way, and it's a great way to help creators too. But all in all, though, starting a podcast or starting a show like this, you're going to gain more personally speaking. And if you're not gaining personally, then you're probably going to like burn out soon, because you're doing it for not the right reasons. And the truth is like these things, they take a while to be successful. And a lot of people, they do this for 10 episodes, 20 episodes. And they're like, hey, why is my podcast only getting like 5 downloads? And then, they quit. And so that's one of the biggest things too, of like, you have to be in it in the long term. You have to have the right intentions. You have to be able to look at this from a multi perspective approach. Because you can use this as a vehicle to take you to a lot of places, and, it may not make you money directly, but it may be a great vehicle for your business that can totally help it make more money. So there's many different angles to look at it, but yeah, I'm super glad you guys do what you do, because and I was talking to some friends before this. They saw it on my Instagram, and they were talking to me about marketing in a pandemic. They're like, dude, what are you going to talk about? That seems crazy. But I had such a great time with you guys here. And yeah, you guys are so awesome. And yeah, I mean, for anyone who is, if anyone's listening to this, I would definitely tell people to reach out to me. I think the best place is probably LinkedIn, to send me a personalized connection request. And if people are interested in learning how to start a podcast, my company Growcast is running this free webinar that teaches people how to start a podcast. That if they just go to the website or they go to my LinkedIn, they'll kind of see it. But yeah, you guys are awesome.
We'll post that link with this recording as well, Mark, because I think that'd be useful for everybody. Want to quickly touch on something cultural, and then we can wrap up. When I first moved to the US, I think this whole your title grabbed me initially because of the title, which is Screw Being Shy. Asians generally, South Asians in particular, we don't like to sort of toot our own horns, right? So we say, we'll do this thing, and then someone else will say what a wonderful person this is and how accomplished they are. And what I first learned in the US when I moved there, when go to school there in '87, is that if you don't say how good you are, no one else is going to volunteer to do that, right? So you can do all these wonderful things, and you could be, but no one's going to be your brand ambassador other than yourself, right? And I think one of the greatest, advantages Americans generally have culturally in their DNA is that they're very comfortable talking about themselves candidly, and also with some amount of, I guess, boast about them. I mean, they're very comfortable saying, yeah, I'm an expert on this thing, and I'm good at this, and I'm good at that.
Yeah.
And Sri Lankans, Indians, we don't naturally do that. Even on a conference call in a business setting, when I used to run a sales organization from here globally in Sri Lanka at the time, I would tell this world famous engineer to introduce themselves, and they would just give rank and serial number. I know I'm so and so, and this is what I do. Meanwhile, the counterpart on the other side, who is less qualified, would paint this glorious picture about how qualified they were and what they've done. And so I'm looking at my guy, I'm supposed to sell something, and all he's done is sort of given rank and serial number. I'm like, hey, we got to work on this a little bit, right? I mean, you got to be effusive about your capability, because otherwise nobody's going to find out that you can actually do that, right? So I noticed that even in simple things like LinkedIn profiles, I'm sure you've seen this and you probably talk about them. A lot of people sort of take a summary of their resume. I did this, I went to this school, I did this. I mean, and they completely miss out on that summary being something that, grabs people's attention of why they want to link in with you, right? I mean, what's so unique about you, right? And that's just, people don't do that. They just sort of give their history sort of thing. And that's I noticed a very Asian thing to do, South Asian thing to do. So, and I know that, your profile on the other hand is, right on, spot on, right? So.
Thanks, man. For me, when I was doing my research about this, you actually find out that the highest concentrations of, I don't know if it's shyness, but more social anxiety, the highest concentrations of social anxiety are in Southeast Asia and then the Middle East. I don't know exactly why that is. I think it's due to cultural components. I definitely think that, I don't know, I can't speak on Southeast Asia, but I know Middle East for sure. Mm-hmm. Definitely more conservatism. I would say that most people in the Middle East don't really believe that mental health is real. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of stereotypical cultural misconceptions. Boys are told to not really express their emotions, right. Different things like that. I think all that stuff heavily plays into it. But yeah, I totally see your point on that, because if you don't do that, then nobody else will. I think the most important thing is you just have to do it in your own way. Right. And I personally, you meet people, and I'm not going to say I hate these kinds of people, because a lot of people do this, but I hate it when people do this. But I'll meet someone at an event and they'll just talk about themselves for hours and hours and hours. And you can tell they're trying to give you all these accomplishments and all these achievements and things. And I'm like, bro, do I look like your mom? Am I you trying to get validation from me? And so I think some people, honestly, maybe they're a little too arrogant. Maybe they're a little too confident. Maybe some people are actually very insecure. And maybe they talk a little bit more, because some people who have social anxiety, most of them will just kind of be shy and not talk. But then also there's a percentage of people who have social anxiety who actually be so anxious about what people think about them in social situations that they will talk more, because they're trying to get you to think that yeah. And so honestly, I think you need to strike your own healthy balance of for me, I don't really like introducing myself. I don't like talking about myself, to be honest with you, in general. So I would probably do the shortest, sweetest thing. But it is a skill that you learn as a podcaster, as a communicator. And I would say, the biggest thing that I've learned about this is that whenever I'm on this mic and I'm on my podcast or I'm in a live stream, something that I always do is I always close my eyes and I always try to imagine what other people would be thinking while they're listening to my conversation now. Because this may not be exactly what you're talking about, but I think a lot of us, in terms of our communication, we're not that clear, because we feel like we know we feel like we think people know what we're talking about, when in reality it's not that clear outside of the three of us. And so there's just different things that I've learned as a communicator, as a podcast host, that can help represent me to people who don't know me, especially because I am in that public setting. So I don't necessarily think you have to brag or do it, but I do think you have to promote yourself, respectfully. And what the last thing that I'll say on this is that for me, I really got my start on LinkedIn really building my first sort of time on LinkedIn, I didn't talk about myself at all. I didn't mention myself at all. I got big off LinkedIn from just using it to promote my podcast, where I would say, hey, look at this author I interviewed. This is what I learned. And so I did that hundreds of times before I was finally like, hey, I'm Mark and I'm this person, you know, and it's always changed throughout the course of the period of time and stuff. And so yeah, that's the biggest thing. And so I would say find like your own unique way of doing it where it makes you comfortable. Don't feel like you have to pretend to be like some like sales, like trainer, radio extroverted radio host personality like Gary Vee or like Grant Cardone or someone like them.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. So spot on. With that great last piece of advice, Mark, thank you so much for sort of gracing Pandemic Punditry and putting us on the map a little bit as well. Thank you for doing that. Your podcasts are a source of great inspiration. I invited Jason Campbell after listening to your podcast, and
awesome.
He was an amazing speaker, and so we're going to feature him soon. So yeah, I mean, we've learned a ton in this short interaction with you. Thanks for taking all of this time and being generous with all your insights as well. Wish you all the very best on your new endeavor, Growcast. We'll put the link down for people who are looking at the recording as well, so that they can
Thank you.
Go ahead and come and you might see us on a webinar as well on there. So thanks again, Mark, and have a great rest of the week, and all the very best in your future endeavors. And
thank you so much.
Our paths cross again some point.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys so much. You guys are the best. And thank you for making my day. You guys are awesome hosts. You guys are very well done. This is definitely one of the best podcasts I've done in a while. So thank you guys so much.
Oh, wow.
And
thank you very much.
If I can help you guys do anything, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And and thank you for everyone out there listening. This was awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you again.
So much.